Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm in the editing process of this video, and I realize this video is more than likely not going to be monetized because that's how YouTube suppresses, one of the ways they suppress alternate opinions about what's going on in these current events. And this video is timely. I can't wait a week for it to come out, right? It's a long video. And so if you don't see ads, then this needs to be a community supported video if you think it's worthy of your support because, I have to put it up either way. But here it is. Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is not so much a Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies. It's mostly going to be a coverage of the destruction of Palestine because that's what's up. It's my continuing coverage I started yesterday on my other channel. A lot of things I'm going to talk about here. The video I made yesterday on my other channel, my normal Pockets of Future channel, which was entitled Biden, Trump's, and RFK Take the Big Z Plunge. The big Z is Zionism. And so that's kind of mandatory requirement for this video, that the coverage is, continuing. I'm not going to be able to repeat myself every time, right, and say things that I said in the previous videos. And things I say today will be based on, either you have the knowledge somewhere else from some other source or, you've watched my previous video. But let's start here. One of my viewers sent me this. President Joe Biden's brother admits naked selfie found on gay dating site is genuine, claims phone was hacked. So if I was going to, every day people send me stuff. Every day people are, sending me links or things I find. And I have about 15 or 20 that I do on this channel. So if this was a normal day with Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies, I would have to start somewhere. And if it's a big celebrity story or a big story, it's just obvious where what I should lead with, right? But when I saw this one, I'm like, well, this is because usually I take the links that people send me and I just put them in, no particular order. And there's I have a couple of tabs that don't have I'm in the editing process. It's called the favicon. I was trying to think of it when I was doing this, but a favicon, something that, an icon that lets you know you're on that website, right? And I have a couple of pictures that don't have any icons on them. And I put all the stuff for this channel on the right side of those icons. And it's just random. But when I saw this, I'm like, all right, this is what I'm going to lead with tomorrow. And here it is. Joe Biden's younger brother, Frank, admits naked selfie. And so what's going on with those Bidens? This is his brother, who I believe is involved with lots of money laundering and lots of, his brother makes a lot more money than he should. Let's put it that way. And then there was this. Finally orchestrated push to destroy the ever-shrinking remnants of Palestine. This is a 5-star meme. I'll leave it here. People can take a screenshot of it and share it or whatever they want to do with it. But this is going to be the centerpiece about what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go through some sites. I'm going to go through a lot of videos. And then I'm going to give my, my voiceover analysis of what's going on. Okay, so let me just put a qualifier in here. I'm in the editing portion, and I, need to do this because of the victim consciousness thing here, the movement, the victim consciousness technique, that people will say, well, you hate Jews, right? This is how people will look at what I'm saying because I'm being critical of Israel like I'm critical of so many different countries and power groups, and I'm saying what I see here. But there'll be people who want to twist it and say that I hate Jews. But anybody who's watched my channel over the years know that I've been against the movement within the truth community to blame the Jews for everything. And there's some people that do that. And criticizing Israel and Jewish people always backfires because of the way they use victim consciousness. And it has a negative effect on the truth community, censoring all of us, which I'll get into when I talk about victim consciousness, right? But it is something that is counterproductive. And I talk about hate being something that's inside of you and taking personal responsibility. And when you start blaming demographics based in race or religion, that's always problematic. And I have people in my life, Jewish people, friends. The preceptor that started me going on Saj Mark so many years ago, my preceptor Fred, he was born Jewish. He transcended his religion like I was born Catholic. And then I became a Saj Mark practitioner and transcended my religion, became a spiritual person. And he did the same thing, but he came from Jewish ancestry. I went to my friend Alan's bar mitzvah when I was, 13, whatever he was, 13 years old, I guess, back in Connecticut so many years ago. And so I have lots of friends who are Jewish. A lot of Jewish people lived in West Hartford, Connecticut, where I grew up. My sister, I haven't talked to my sister in years, but her husband is Jewish, so I don't have any issues with Jewish people or any people, right? It's clear, like from my behavior and what I say here, I'm not against them, right? This isn't some personal belief or personal prejudice or personal hatred, which exists, in here, the truth community. Many of you have it. But like everything else, I tell the truth. What I see, this is what I see. These are the patterns I see. And it's pretty obvious that I'm right. Like they're trying to pressure everyone not to say these things. The media's covering this in a way that Palestine is always the villain and Israel is always the victim. That's the official position of the mainstream media, of the government. We have three politicians, Trump, Biden, and RFK Jr., who's probably the worst of the three, who are all Zionists, all believe in the idea that God promised the Jews Israel. It's a promise from God, and they have a right to defend their land. And I don't agree with that. God doesn't promise things like that. And, it's Palestine. It was Palestine. It's been invaded and occupied, and now the Palestinians are all but gone. And this is when Palestine will probably disappear altogether. This is what it looks like is going to happen. Palestine is no longer going to be a part of Israel. Like what was once Palestine will fully become Israel after this so-called war. The war in Israel is what they're calling it. And I'll show you that now. Okay, so this is MSNBC. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. I had to wait for this logo, and then they wouldn't let me use my ScreenFlow or take a screenshot of it, so I had to take a picture of this with my camera. But anyways, they're calling this the war in Israel because we've established this already yesterday, that when you search Palestine, Palestine no longer exists. Okay, so here is Israel, right? This is the country of Israel, but there is places here that are actually Palestine, like the Gaza Strip. They still have a little bit left. Of course, we know this from the maps, right? So we'll get back to that. But there is no place, such a place called Palestine. That's why they talk about the Palestinian state. This is a country that used to be called Palestine. Then the UN gave Israel half of it, and now it's pretty much almost gone. So when they say war in Israel, they really mean the war in Palestine, because the rockets that came from Gaza Strip by so-called T group called Hamas is not the war, right? The war is now taking place in the Gaza Strip. We'll get into it. The evidence is overwhelming. It's a war on Palestine from Israel. And we'll get into the lies and the deception, all these things in a moment. So here is MSNBC's coverage. I don't know if this is a black screen for you guys because they have a blocker on here. But in terms of if I unmute it, it'll turn black for me. Like I won't be able to see anything. But it says Israel at war, not Palestine. And then it just has all this other stuff. This is their live tracker. And one of the things that we've learned, X, formerly Twitter, amplifies disinformation amid the Israeli-Hamas conflict. Now, I had MSNBC on waiting for them to get to their coverage of the war on Israel, really the war in Palestine, because I wanted to get you that screenshot. And they were talking about, this is International Mental Health Day. Today's Tuesday, October 10th. And they brought a doctor on talking about the effects of war and watching war. And the news anchor, the one with glasses, she's on MSNBC in the morning. I don't know her name. But she said, oh, you have to really watch where you get your information from and what kind of information you're watching. And so this is them saying that there's all this disinformation on Twitter and they're not doing anything to stop it, right? So if you search war it comes up as war in Israel, right? I just typed in war up here, and here it says war in Israel, and that's what they're pushing here, right? This is the war in Israel. And here they say the war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is not a country, which I've covered before. And so they say the Israel and Palestinian conflict, and there's no real conflict. You have one superior force, which I documented in my video yesterday. So I was going to get this with my phone yesterday. I turned on the news, and Wolf Blitzer was in for whatever her name is, Erin Burnett. And Erin Burnett is a seasoned reporter, but they ousted her for Wolf Blitzer. And Wolf Blitzer was covering this, and he had a panel on. They were talking about Iran and Russia's responsibility that Iran supplied the money for Hamas. And if they did, and Israel finds out, Israel's going to retaliate. And did Russia know? Which is another pathway to World War III. And wouldn't it be kind of the thing that happened if the World War III began in Israel, between Israel and Iran? Wouldn't that be like kind of what's going to happen because of the importance of that region and that area? And so they were basically talking about Iran being hit with some sort of retaliation, and did Russia know, and how much culpable is Russia? And there's already tension between Russia and America. And so this is the pathway to World War III. These are the consequences. It says it time and time again here. This is Fox News. Iran is obviously behind Hamas attacks.
Former State Department spokesperson and founder of Polaris National Security, Morgan, it feels like we're in uncharted territory here, even though we're talking about a region that is historically quite volatile. You just heard Trey Yank saying that he's never seen fighting quite like this before. So break down the situation at hand from your perspective and how the United States should respond to this.
Israel intelligence failure today, a massive one. We've had them too in the United States. Clearly, a national security threat to Israel, and we're seeing an attack spread to an open conflict. Right now, it's a proxy conflict between Israel and Iran. Abraham Accords. That was 4 peace deals between Israel and Arab states, the first in 26 years. Within just a few months of the Biden administration, what did you see happen? Hamas started attacking Israel again.
No way, did they? It's just so right. It's just poor timing.
Now we have the war in Ukraine. And now, we're seeing this today, which I think could get incredibly messy, especially when you think about, again, Pete, you were explaining so well to the audience. Lebanon, Hezbollah is another terrorist organization controlled and funded by the Iranians. Israel went to war with Lebanon in 2006. That was a dangerous and costly war. If it spreads to Lebanon, it risks the chance, and I can tell you in the Middle East, the Middle Eastern leaders that I'm talking to here are concerned that this could spread to an open conflict. Right now, it's a proxy conflict between Israel and Iran, with Iran backing these attacks today. People here on the ground are concerned that this could result in a conflict not only with Lebanon, but God forbid, maybe with Iran as well.
God forbid, right? So, there's a pathway to something much bigger and worse, right? Israel and Iran, and then Russia gets involved somehow with America, and then kaboom. So this video was originally just going to be about Beatty and Beatty's lying statement, Beatty, the Prime Minister of Israel. And that it's going to end with that, but I'm working towards that now. But we can start here with the history of Gaza in 2 minutes. I love Gaza and the rubble.
Gaza is only about 25.
And this is from CNN.
Gaza is only about 25 miles long and 7 miles wide, but this small strip of land is one of the most fought over in history. It was an Egyptian base, a royal city for the Philistines, and the place where the Hebrew hero Samson, betrayed by Delilah, met his death. Since then, much blood has been spilled. The most recent contest for Gaza began at the end of World War II, when persecuted Jews travelled to Israel from Europe looking for a new start after the horrors of the Holocaust.
So these were Palestinians. This was Palestine. And persecuted Jews came there to Gaza, right? So this is actually somewhat accurate. That this was, they were immigrants. This is like, all of a sudden, America becomes Mexico, right? That they flood the borders with, Mexican people come through the southern border, or Canadians. You could call it Canadians, right? Whatever it might be. And next thing you know, you're overwhelmed by immigrants, and then you name the country, rename the country, start speaking a different language, and they start taking your houses and stuff as Americans. This is what what happened to Native Americans, for example, right? And so, where lands that you used to possess now are owned by another invading entity.
In 1947, the United Nations created a plan to split Palestine into two lands.
Yes, exactly. This is fairly accurate so far. I mean, it's leaving out lots of details, but it was a country called Palestine.
One for Jews and one for the Arab people.
Right, it's now called Israel. Let's document this. There's a war in Israel, not a war in Palestine. Palestine doesn't exist on Google Maps. So there's a country named Palestine that no longer exists.
Backed by the US President Harry S. Truman, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founder, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. Egypt then attacked Israel through the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, that's not accurate. We know that from the USS Liberty debacle, that Israel was the aggressor, but, this is CNN.
Israel was victorious, but Gaza remained under the control of Egypt, and an influx of Palestinian refugees began. In 1967, war broke out between Israel...
No, so Palestine had Gaza, right? And originally it was part of Palestine, and then now they're saying that Palestinian refugees...
Egypt, Jordan and Syria, in what became known as the Six-Day War...
Okay, this is where the Israelis were the aggressors. We know that from the operation, the Liberty, the USS Liberty that was sunk by Israel. And a scared boopless LBJ, the president at the time, when he thought it was Egypt that was attacking, he went all in and he scrambled all the jets. Then he heard it was Israel. He pulled everything back. I talked about USS Liberty. That's, anybody could look that up.
Israel seized the Gaza Strip and held it for 40 years. Israel pulled its forces out of Gaza in 2005. In 2006, Hamas, a group sworn to destroy Israel and listed by the United States, the European Union and others as a terrorist group, won a landslide victory in Palestinian legislative elections. Hamas was now in control of the territory. However, Israel still controls much of the area's access to and from the Gaza Strip. Since then, Israel and Hamas have been exchanging blows. Israel maintains that Hamas is a violent terror organization, while Hamas says that they represent an oppressed people being victimized.
Okay, so this is, CNN's take on what's happened there in the Gaza Strip. So I didn't watch this, but let's watch what they have to say here.
I want to go now to the maps with CNN Chief National Correspondent Alex Marquardt. He's over here.
Come on, Marquardt. Get in there. Israel at war, see? Again, this is two different, MSNBC and CNN both have the same thing. This is the country of Palestine that no longer exists, and it's taking place in what's supposed to be Palestinian land, which is the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip will be probably all Israel after this war. Like what you're seeing in Russia, right? Whatever. You have an invading force, which is Israel, that has wanted the Gaza Strip for a very long time, beachfront property, and they're going to take it just like we saw in Lahaina and Hawaii and these things, right? It's a land grab. Nothing more, nothing less, but it could be something much more in terms of World War III. But this is a land grab. That's what you're seeing.
The magic wall with me. So, Alex,
This is the magic wall. Bring the magic wall, Alex. The magic wall is just a touch screen. They call it a magic wall in CNN.
To me about where things stand. I mean, we were just talking to Anderson about the constant bombardment by the air into Gaza and then from Gaza. What are we seeing on the ground as this war now is?
Well, she's horrible. I've never seen her before, but she's horrible at, speaking.
underway?
Well, what we're starting to see, really, Abby, is that really fierce response that Prime Minister Netanyahu promised, with major questions about what happens next. This up here is the northern border.
There's no major there's no major questions about what happens next. It's Israel taking Gaza, which they've wanted to do. They have an excuse. They're the victims. We'll get into that in a bit. I go to the narrative, but we know what's going to happen here. Gaza is going to no longer be a part of some imaginary country that no longer exists called Palestine. It's going to be a part of Israel.
Border of Israel with Lebanon. Major questions right now about whether Hezbollah, another militant group like Hamas that is also backed by Iran, whether they get involved in this.
Exactly. That's got to happen. We just heard it. It's the next thing. I mean, if you hear it on the news, it's got to be happening soon.
Fight and open up a second front in this war. We saw missiles being fired by Hezbollah into Israel today after Israel carried out an airstrike and killed a small number of Hezbollah fighters. But the vast majority of what we're seeing is happening.
Small number. Israel just kills small numbers. It's a small number. Little, strike and then.
Here around Gaza in central Israel. I want to zoom in on there. So what we know now from the Israelis is that they have managed to take back all of the communities around Gaza that had been attacked by Hamas gunmen. This is the Gaza Strip. It is controlled on three sides by Israel. There's a naval blockade along the water, but there are two sides that are covered with fences and walls, and it's through those fences that those Hamas...
So Israel this is like a little concentration camp, right? Which should be familiar here in this situation. It was based in... What Hitler did was based in reservations in America, what he did with concentration camps, right? So reservations in America is the way that you're put on a small piece of land. But unfortunately for the Israelis, this is great beachfront property, right, on a nice ocean here, the Mediterranean Sea. And it's valued. It's a port, it gives access, but of course they do a blockade here. But Israel has walled them into this little area, right? Like a little Indian reservation, like a little concentration camp type of setup. And they're squeezing them. They've been squeezing them forever because Israel wants this land and everybody knows it, right? Like everybody, who has half a brain knows this is land that Israel wants. They want it all, and we'll get into that in a bit.
Attackers were able to get out and kill so many people. Again, now the Israelis are saying these southern communities are safe. We have been seeing hundreds and hundreds of airstrikes all along the Gaza Strip, as you've noted.
No kids, though. Those airstrikes are not hitting kids. No kids are being hit. All right. So then I was recommended this video today. Velshi, Israel shutting off electricity, water in Gaza will create a humanitarian disaster. Of course it will. This was recommended, I think, this morning.
Ali Velshi, just getting into Israel took a lot of effort. Describe how you got into the country and what it is you found when you did.
So when we determined that we were coming in here, the flights were being canceled. You couldn't fly into Tel Aviv. The most logical place to fly into if you're not going into Tel Aviv is Amman, Jordan. In a normal world, that would be a 2-hour drive, allow for a little time at the border, which is generally quite efficient, maybe 2.5 to 3 hours tops. It took us the better part of the day. We left Amman, Jordan at midnight last night, Eastern time, and it was 8 hours or something like that before we were here. The border crossings are very tight. This city, Tel Aviv, it's late, but this is a vibrant city in which there would normally be people, taxis. There's one car here. There's buses that keep going by. They're entirely empty. Let me tell you what we've been hearing here. There have been jets flying by.
Jets flying.
About an hour ago, we heard 8 successive Iron Dome interceptions here. We do know that this is the time of night where rockets are coming in from Gaza. This has happened for the last couple of nights. And that
they did it on an Israeli Jewish holiday. I mean, they're big meaners over there in Hamas. On a Jewish holiday, they decide to bomb Israel. What a bunch of meaners. I mean, choosing a holiday of all places to bomb a foreign country, an adversarial country.
Airstrikes are going into Gaza. Last night, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, say that they hit 500 Hamas targets in Gaza. Now, in doing that, Gaza...
They've claimed that they've killed 15,000 or 1,500 Hamas militants. They have the bodies or whatever it is. Like that, I don't have the headline. I had it somewhere else, but it's not important. I just tell you.
It's a very, very densely populated place. A lot of apartment buildings. They've been targeted apartment buildings, office buildings, and mosques, saying that they had great success in doing
Mosques. There's bombing mosques and apartment buildings with kids in it. So Israel is now probably killed 5 or 10 or 20 times as many Palestinians as Hamas killed Jews, right? That's, again, this is where they have bombs versus rockets. They have air superiority versus no air force. They have, I cover this on my other channel. Palestine doesn't have an army. They don't have an air force. They don't have a navy. And Israel has the 18th strongest army in the world for a country that only has 10 million people.
They wanted to do, but civilians were killed. So Hamas has responded by saying for every one civilian killed in these Israeli attacks, they will execute one hostage. Now, that's what they've said. Israel has said they're going to implement an entire siege on Gaza. Gaza gets its fuel, its food, everything it needs, really, through Israel. The electricity in Gaza is provided by an electrical generation plant that works on diesel fuel. They're cutting off fuel and water to Gaza. Gaza's probably got 2 days left, maybe 3 at best, of fuel to generate electricity, after which there's no actual fuel, there won't be fuel to drive, and there will not be any electricity there. Israel has called up 300,000 reservists. Never before in its history has anything like that happened. In fact, they're not all in the country, so El Al has...
So, that's a humanitarian crisis. There'll be no food. There'll be no water. There'll be no anything there, right? They'll be cut off from the internet and all these things, right? So there's no way to communicate what's going on. There's no way to show the world what's happening to them. All the people, having no access to videotaping the atrocities that are going to happen as Israel goes and takes Gaza Strip away from the Palestinians.
Established flights to bring reservists to Israel. Israel's also preparing for a fight on 3 sides. There's been an ongoing kinetic situation in the West Bank, and that is escalating right now. There's no army in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority is there. That is sort of stochastic violence.
There's no army in the Gaza Strip. It's, private group, Hamas. And so the Palestinians have no army. They have nothing.
That's occurring there. In the north, there's...
Israel is ranked number 18. The Palestinians have no army. It's not like the Palestinians are number 20 and the Israelis are 18. The Palestinians have nothing. They have no means of defending themselves, right? And all their power and their water and those things are coming through Israel. So Israel controls them completely. Israel can turn off their water, turn off their electricity. They own them, right? They own the Palestinians, but it's not enough. They want that land.
Trouble from Lebanon with Hezbollah potentially. There has been an incursion today. It's very small. The Israelis have fought that back. And, of course, in the south. So Israeli civil defense authorities are telling Israelis all over the country, have yourselves at least 3 days worth of water and non-perishable goods available to you in anticipation that this war could spread. That's a 3-front war. Israel had to call up reserves just to deal with the situation in the West Bank over the last 10 months. Now they're calling up 300,000 more reserves. So right now in this country and in Gaza, a very, very dangerous, stressful, intense situation, Alicia.
Okay, so this evil MFer, right? I saw this last night, and this whole video is predicated on his statement. It exists because of the lies, that he is telling here. And it starts off with this.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it.
What are you in 3rd grade? I don't start fights, I just finish them. Yeah. When he said this opening statement, let me move to a voiceover here. Let's first remember the map. So this is Israel from 1946, 1945. This was all Palestine, right? And this is what it is now. I showed you that yesterday. So Israel has just kept on taking land. They started off with this, and they ended up not with just that, but here it is even more recently. They've just been grabbing land. It's been land grabs, building settlements on Palestinian land, and just moving in there, and then controlling more and more of the Palestinians' life, where they Everything that the Palestinians get, food, water, electricity, all their needs come from Israel, have to go through Israel, and Israel squeezes it and creates a humanitarian disaster when they want. Okay, so the first part of this is I just went and ate breakfast, and I turned on the news, and MSNBC had just a great example of victim consciousness coming from a Jewish person, which I'll show you in a moment. I got it on my phone. I'm going to talk about victim consciousness. But the first part is BD saying, we didn't start this war. We did not start this war. We're going to finish it. But we're going to finish it. We're tough guys. We're going to finish it. So you're saying that Hamas just asked for a major ass kicking, because they're going to get an ass kicking. The Palestinian people and Hamas are going to get a major ass kicking. Everybody knows it. Does anybody think that's not going to happen? You have a military against a non-military. You have military superiority on all sides. And you've got the backing of the world's most powerful military, as well as many other countries and the UN to some extent in Europe. So the Palestinians got dick, right? They got nothing. Palestinians have absolutely nothing. They are completely beholden to the Israelis for their power, for their water, for their jobs. Many of them work for many of the Palestinians work for Jews. And so everything that is in their life is predicated on their oppressor giving it to them, Israel giving it to them, right? And everybody knows when they saw this happening, that Israel was going to go into Gaza and lay the major smackdown on the Palestinians. And it's a pattern of behavior, which is well established. So why in the world would the Palestinians attack you? Why would they attack you? They're suicidal. They want to lose their land. They just want to go out with one last big rocket barrage. You know, Israel has this thing, the Golden Dome or whatever, the concrete, whatever the dome thing is they got over there, stupid dome. The Iron Dome, where they have this sophisticated anti-missile defense system. And they're shooting down all these missiles, right? Very minimal damage done. You know, they're talking about hostages being taken and kids being taken, the execution of these people. My wife heard from somebody who was a former Israeli military person, a woman, and she said, there's no way this should be happening, these attacks. Like, they withdrew their military. Again, the West Bank the Gaza Strip is completely surrounded, as is the West Bank. Israel has forces, superior forces. In fact, there's a force against no force, right? A military force against no force surrounding these areas of Palestine. And so the idea that Hamas would go in and overwhelm the Israeli soldiers and take civilian captors next to the Gaza Strip is ridiculous. It's stupid. Nobody would believe that. Nobody with any common sense would believe that. Why would that happen when Israel has, barbed wire fences and walls? You can see all this stuff. People have posted videos about the abuse that takes place from Israeli soldiers to Palestinian children, Palestinians who are leaving the area to go do their jobs so they can work for the Israelis, so they can support themselves, right? Or go to their schools or whatever it is. They have to cross these fences. And, there's a video of a kid who was going to school, and the Israeli soldiers grabbed him and roughed him up and were going to interrogate him until he told who was throwing rocks, right? Like, who was throwing rocks, all these things. Israeli people spitting on, so there's a video that came out the other day. I think YouTube recommended it to me, from Al Jazeera, and Israeli people were spitting on Christians in Bethlehem, churchgoers who were leaving the church, maybe Catholics, I'm not sure. And the Israeli people, Jewish people, were spitting on them as they went by, like very, hostile. You have a group of people who is dominant there, and that's the Jewish people. They're dominant in Israel that used to be Palestine. And the Palestinians just go from one ass kicking to the next. The Palestinians are going to get their ass kicked, and they're getting their ass kicked right now. The reason they're getting their ass kicked because they did something, allegedly, that provoked the ass kicking. So why would they do that? Why in the world would they do that? Like, why would you do that? Why would you, knowing that you're going to get your ass kicked by a superior force, go in and get that done? Now, you could be going through something, depression, suicidal behavior, but as a nation, as a country, the Hamas, as a group, they know what was going to happen. Do they just want Israel to come in and take all their lands? Probably. Well, then who are they working for? It isn't for the Palestinians. It isn't for the Palestinian children and the Palestinian people that are there, because they don't want another ass kicking. Do you think the Palestinian people are like, oh, yes, we haven't had an ass kicking in a while, so why don't you guys launch some rockets and take some hostages so make sure that we lose all the little bit of land that we have left? So it's stupid for BD to come out and say, we don't want this war. Because another part of this is, you don't think they want this oceanfront property or all of it? Because they've taken pretty much all of it already. Do you don't think they want more land? You don't think they want to build more settlements? They don't think they want to turn this thing, get rid of the Palestinians altogether? The Native American people and black people are taken as slaves, African American slaves. They hate, to some extent, some of them, the white people that did this, right? Maybe all white people, maybe all Europeans. They call them colonizers. I was just watching a couple of Native American shows where they're calling white people colonizers, right? All these things. And, they kind of have a right to, right? Now, again, I believe everything comes from God, and hate is a negative emotion. You have to get over it inside yourself. You have to remove the hate inside you. I talk about this in depth in my spiritual videos, but hate is something that's inside of you. You have to remove the hate because it just destroys you inside you, right? Your hate is your hate. The object of your hate, whether it be one group of people, one demographic or another, or people in your life, is the object of the hate, but it's the object of the hate that's inside you. The external object, but the hate exists in you, right? And you have to remove your hate, whatever it might be, whatever your circumstances, whatever unfair things that happen to you or your people or whatever. You have to destroy the hate. And that's next level. But Native American people, and some of them assimilated, they became a part of America, part of the, they leave the reservation, the Indian nation, they become part of the American culture, whatever. And they, they've learned to enjoy it and they're happy, whatever. The casinos, maybe those things. But there's traditional Native American people that feel kind of, bad about what's happened to them, even now. This is hundreds of years from what happened. Same thing with African slaves, people like that. We know they want reparations, all these things. When one group of people kicks another group of people's ass, this happened in Hawaii, right? The whole thing with Lahaina is another example of this. When one group of people oppresses and colonizes and kicks the ass of another group of people and takes their stuff, the group that got the ass kicking is, going to have negative feelings towards the other group. And the group that did the ass kicking is always going to feel a little bit of guilty, a little bit ashamed, a little bit of, it's a kind of a blemish on their, whatever it is, right? And so what they want to do is ethnically cleanse that group of people, get rid of them altogether, and take all the land. For the Jews, for the Zionists, they believe that God promised them that land. That's their belief in the Old Testament. That's a bad book, the way that it talks about God. God isn't, the being that they're talking about as God is really a demon in that book, because he's petty, he's narcissistic, he wants human and animal sacrifices, he's constantly punishing the Jews and other people, and he's just a bad dude, right? Like it's not really God that they're talking about. It's some other demonic entity or something, right? They worship something that, God is love, and the being in that book, the fire and brimstone, God of wrath, a wrathful God, is not, in the Old Testament. So the Judeo-Christian religion has that bad belief about God, and a blasphemous belief about God. God isn't like that at all. Whatever they're talking about isn't God. God isn't a dick. He's not a narcissist. He's not murderous. He's not any of these things. God is love, right? God is in everything. So why would he punish people? He'd be punishing himself, right? God is, doesn't have an ego in the sense of God is one thing and you're another. God is everything, right? God is, love is a universal thing, and everything has love in it at its base. Love is the building block for everything in the universe. But in terms of their belief, they believe that in their Bible, in their book, that God promised the state of Israel to the Jews. So they believe that Palestine belongs to them, even though there was an exodus, even though they left it behind and the Palestinian people own this property, they always believe it was theirs and believe that they deserved it back because God said so, because God said so. And so whatever they do is fulfilling God's will. And if they have to ethnically cleanse the country of these Palestinians, then that's what God wants. So they believe it comes from God, and that's a dangerous thing. And so do the stupid evangelical Christians who also subscribe to this belief. And it's a bad belief, and it's wrong. God didn't promise you shit, right? God didn't promise you shit. This is your ego, right? This is what your ego told you to do. This is what your desires told you to do as a collective group, is to get rid of the Palestinians and take their land. And it's not a divine mandate. It's a human, came from the UN and came from, these other countries for whatever reason they want to do it. And these Zionists, right, that are there. And Beatty is a Zionist. So that's a lie. Like, don't lie. You're just lying about this. But they believe that the land is theirs. So who do you think is more motivated to start this war? The group that's going to get their ass kicked and has gotten their ass kicked, and every time that something like this has happened, they get their ass kicked, right? And who uses victim consciousness better than Jewish people, than the Israelis? I mean, this is something that we learned from the big event here in September 2001. The victim consciousness that came from that event, 3,000 Americans dead, killed 1 million Iraqis, and destroyed the governments in Afghanistan and Iraq, in Libya, some of these other countries surrounding it lost as well. So 3 major countries were toppled, all of these other things, right? Let me segue into let's go to the Wesley Clark video here. This is Wes Clark from the Clinton administration. He was the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And this is his story about what happened here.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the
neocons, right?
Joint staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess."
It's pretty funny, right? 1 million people dead. That's pretty funny, right? I don't know. Pretty funny. Yeah, look, and they killed 1 million Iraqis. Boy, we got egg on our face.
I don't know what else to do. So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq."
So this was their plan, right? This is a guy who was be in the know. So he is a person, either he's lying about this, but we know he's not because they tried it, right? Listen to what he says here.
In 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Because Iran, it's Iran. Like, you don't know how to pronounce it. You're like he ran for president, right? But they went after all those countries except for Somalia, or the other ones. Let's listen to them again.
7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
So Sudan, Lebanon, and Somalia, they didn't get to. Somalia's in Africa, obviously, the pirates there. War-torn country. It has a lot of minerals and things like this. Lebanon, another anti-Israel, bordering Israel, right? The country that Israelis want to get taken under control. And so we know what happened with Libya. So they got 4 of the 7. They went after Syria and they were stopped. And of course, the big one was Iran. Iran is the crown jewel for them to get.
I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
Okay, so, it's not a joke. So let's go back to the map here. So what he's talking about here, we have to get all the way over here to get Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan has the opium. Afghanistan is one of the greatest places to produce opium, and strategically it's just great. Like here's Pakistan and here's Iran, and it's just a country that, many powers. Alexander the Great, his empire died by trying to take over Afghanistan, and many of these other, of course, Russia. I mean, it's where empires go to die. All these countries that failed in Afghanistan, and then they collapsed afterwards. Of course, America being the next big one, but Afghanistan was the first one they went in, right? And that was, supposedly where Bin Laden was, all those things. But here are the other countries. They want to get Lebanon, which borders Israel here, right? Egypt here. Then this is Libya, which they took out, which is rich in minerals and oil and things like this, right? These are all oil rich and they have valuable resources. And down here is you have Somalia is down here. And so they went after all these countries in this pivotal region. That's what their plan was. And they can't do that unless the big event in September happened, right? And so we're going to come back to victim consciousness in a bit, but let's go back to Beatty here.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless. Once the Jewish people were defenseless.
Yeah, because they did not have the Palestine, right? They didn't take Palestine away from the Palestinian people yet.
No longer. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions.
Yeah, of course they do. They knew this ahead of time. So why would they do it? What's their motivation here? What's their motivation for doing something that's going to result in a brutal ass kicking that this guy's already promising and executing? Right? That the Gaza Strip will be Israeli property. It will be part of Israel. It'll no longer be the Gaza Strip. It'll just be Israel. And Palestinian people will be absorbed in whatever they'll be, right? They'll be sent over to some other concentration camp, like some Indian reservation, another part of Israel, until they take that away. And they might take all of it. This might be the end of anything known as Palestine because of what Hamas did. Boy, Hamas, that was not smart. What are you guys thinking? What are you thinking, Hamas? It's just stupid. Anybody with half a brain could figure out who did this, right? This is a false flag type situation here. Anybody with any common sense could see what's happening here.
We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
So what is that price? I'm thinking it's Gaza. Maybe it's all of it. So they're going to get rid of all of it. And why wouldn't they? Israel thinks that he thinks, he's a Zionist, that God promised them, at least that's his position, promised them this land. The Palestinians are in the way of what God promised them. They are, they're doing the devil's work. They're not, they're going against God's will. Their existence on Israeli land and claim to the Israeli land goes against God's will. And that's what Zionists believe. That's what the evangelical Christians believe. All you evangelical dopes that, bought into this stuff. And when it's done to you, and it will be, because it's going to happen to America and Americans, when you have Chinese running America or whatever it's going to be, or whatever, happens in the next, couple of years, 10 years, 15 years, and America gets occupied for the first time, and you guys are going to be feeling a certain kind of way about this, and you didn't care when America changed regimes and just bullied everybody, right? And so this is, coming to a suburb near you,
The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. Exactly. Why would they do that? It's mind-boggling. Why would you guys do that? Well, you know we're going to kick your ass, right? It's like you see a lion sleeping in the middle of the, and you walk up and punch it in the face. Or, you know, something worse, like killer whale. I mean, whatever it is, right? Tyrannosaurus Rex. And you go and you punch it in the face, and it's like, oh, why are you eating me, bro? You know, because that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Like, you know when something or somebody can kick your ass, right? Especially a group of people. You know when you're outnumbered. You know when you're outgunned. I mean, you just know it. Like when there's such a severe disparity between the ability to inflict damage. Israel controls every part of these Palestinians' lives, and they surround them and are occupying them. And why would they do this? It's mind-boggling. Listen to him say it. Like he's even saying it.
Against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling. Slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children.
Why would they do that? It's just mind-boggling.
Savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of
So Hamas is ISIS. ISIS isn't controlled by America. ISIS, which we now know, which I've broken down for you all in my other video and many other ones, is an American asset that came from the elite Republican Guard in Iraq. America gave them an oil field and say, here, you guys can have power and money, and you just have to do our bidding. We're just going to blame you for everything that you do, and then we're going to go in and attack Syria or wherever it is, right? And so ISIS is controlled by the CIA in America. He's saying that Hamas is the same thing because he knows ISIS is. If I know, he knows, right? So he's saying Hamas is the same thing, controlled by them to inflict this damage so they can go and do what they wanted to do all along, which is to take all of Palestine and call it Israel.
Civilizations united to defeat ISIS. The forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people and Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it is fighting for every country that stands against barbarism.
Barbarism, exactly. Bullying and beating people up when you have superior forces and exploiting them and turning off their power and electricity and economic sanctions. Look at all the children they've killed from Palestinians. I mean, there's the death count of Palestinians to Jewish people is overwhelming, right? And, this is all based in victim consciousness, right? Israel gets to do this just like America got to do it with the big event in 2001 because of victim consciousness. We're going to get into that next.
Israel will win this war. And when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins.
We win. All the civilizations win. Kaboom. Look at that guy. He nailed it.
In which the Germans tried to hide their war crimes. It took the Allies, remember, years to uncover all that the Nazis did. Here we have people streaming it on real time, on TikTok, on live stream, and on Instagram. A message just went out to parents all over the state of Israel, begging them to delete the apps from their children's phones because Hamas has warned that it is going to live stream the execution of hostages, and they don't want their children seeing it. I want to tell you just a few stories of some of the people that I've been speaking to in Israel, people who are desperate for their family members to come home. I spoke yesterday morning to Shaked Haran.
Okay, so let me just put a qualifier in here. I'm in the editing portion, and I need to do this. So I want to end this thing with victim consciousness. And victim consciousness is used as a weapon for your personal gain. You become a victim. I've lived with this. My ex was a person who used victim consciousness as a manipulative tool. I've talked about this with the assault cycle. And there's a meme I often show you. I'm not going to show you the meme, but I'll read it. The victim stance is a powerful one. The victim is always morally right, neither responsible nor accountable, and forever entitled to sympathy. And so In terms of, well, we'll get to the victim stance in just a moment, and the victimization here, where who gets to claim to be the victim, but we know what the outcome is going to be because we've already seen it. Does anybody think that Palestine is going to regain some of the lands that they lost or some of the power that they used to have? Because they've lost significant amounts of land and power where they owned the whole country and they were a sovereign state and they were in charge of their own destiny, right? They had their own, government, they had their own culture, and it's gone. That's all gone. Like they just got little bits of land, occupied land. They live stressful lives in fear, right? And they've been occupied, they've been abused, they've been oppressed. They are the, Native Americans. They're the slaves. They're the, they're the occupied force, right? They were the, they are the Jews in Nazi Germany, right? They are the, the people without power who have been in some way abused by the people who are in power. And so does anybody think that at some point Palestine is going to regain what it used to have? Any of it? Is it going to get more, right? Is it ever going to have anything? No, of course not, right? This is going in one direction. Everyone sees the direction this is going. Israel has all the cards. They have all the power behind them. And this most current event, is it going to end up better for Israel or better for Palestine? It's going to end up better for Israel. And BD just said it, right? He said, we're going to go in there, we're going to kick their ass, and they're going to pay a price, and everyone's going to see what happens when you go up against Israel. So when you look at what's happened, and you look at what's going to happen, you know that this is a one-sided affair where one side is dominating the other side. It's like the Native Americans, right? Who, slowly the white people moved across the country, taking more and more of native lands. And taking people like the Trail of Tears, where they took people from like Tennessee area. The Trail of Tears here's the article. The Trail of Tears was an ethnic cleansing and forced displacement of approximately 60,000 people of the civilized tribes between 1830 and 1950. As part of the Indian removal, members of the Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations were forcibly removed from their ancestral homes in southeastern United States to a newly designed Indian territory west of the Mississippi after the passage of the Indian Removal Act. And what they did is take these people from like Tennessee, for example, the Cherokee Indians. They were in Tennessee area, nice area, lush area, good climate, a robust area, and they threw them out in the middle of like Oklahoma and places like that, right? And so they were taking them from the good lands and putting them in the bad lands. And the Trail of Tears, a lot of people died because they did it in like the middle of the winter and they were marched. They had to walk from like Tennessee to Oklahoma, which is a huge amount of land to cover. And, it's just a horrible thing. And so this is what I'm talking about is happening to the Palestinians, right? People can say whatever they want. You can be an evangelical Christian who believes this is, part of your Bible, and you can be a left-leaning person who's on board with this because whatever your beliefs in, whatever your democratic, indoctrination. But this is what it is. It's an abuse of a people. The Palestinian people have no power. And at the end of this event, we all know what's going to happen. Israel's going to be in much better shape. And what they want is going to happen. Like Israel wants certain things and Palestine wants certain things. Israel's going to get what they want and Palestine is going to get what they don't want, right? So there is a victim and a victimizer here. And whatever, BS thing they're rolling out there is because they can't just go in and take their land. Israel just can't go in and invade them and take their land, right? Israel can't do that and look like a good guy. They can't go and just wipe out the remaining Palestinians. So every time they want to take more land, they have to create a situation where they are the victim, where they have victim consciousness, where they have a victim stance, where they have been victimized. And what do they bring up every time they do that? The Holocaust. That Israel was, Jews have been abused and tortured and mistreated by people the same way they're treating the Palestinians now, right? And the way that they treated people in the Bible. You guys remember from the Bible that God is ordering the Israelites to just go in and destroy all these people, the Canaanites and the Edomites and these other people out there. That God is ordering them to go in and just destroy other peoples because they're heathens or they don't believe in the one true God or whatever it is, right? And that's a big part of the Bible. Moses is marching across the desert with all these Jewish people, and God's ordering them to destroy one group or this guy. These guys are idol worshipers. Go destroy them. These guys are Sodom and Gomorrah, all these countries, and they go in, they just destroy and kill all these people. But what we see now is people want to have victim consciousness so they can then justify whatever they do, because if you're the victim, you can justify whatever you do to the other people, the other group. And America did that with the big event 2001, where we were victimized. Oh my God, they never forget this thing, the way we were victimized. We're a great, loving country, and they just hate the way we live, and they're just bad people, these Muslims, and let's go in and destroy a bunch of their country, right? That's what happened. It was victim consciousness, and they learned this from Israel. Israel has been, the predominant group of people that have used the victim consciousness of the Holocaust. There's a Jewish woman who says this is our secret weapon. It's an old video. I looked for it. I couldn't find it a couple of years back, but it went around the internet. She was talking to people in Europe, and she said, yeah, victim consciousness is our secret weapon, and they're constantly bringing up the Holocaust to justify doing bad things, right? Because they were victimized once, and they can therefore do bad behaviors to Palestinians because of what happened to them at the hands of the Germans. And, this story is more complex than people know because, none of these stories are going to be accurate based in one side gets to tell the story, right? One side gets to tell people their side of the story. And in this case, Israeli people and Jewish people are victims, and they get to do whatever they want to the Palestinians because of their former victimization. But to be victims, you need events. And to be, aggressive, you need to be hit first, right? You need to not throw the first punch. So a superior force, this is a law. This is a law of, one of the rules of engagement, right? A superior force has to do some sort of false flag or provoke some sort of attack, exaggerate that attack, so then they can retaliate and go to war with a country that wants no part of war because they know they're going to get their ass kicked, right? And so to justify this in the world, an invading force, an occupying force, a superior military force has to be attacked in some way and then claimed to be a victim. This is also kind of learned from what Gandhi did. Gandhi uses victim consciousness in the opposite way, where the Indians had no power, no military, but they provoked the British into beating them and doing things and then shamed the British worldwide and got the British out of India. And so this was a learned strategy, right? Okay, so I just took a break. Sometimes I have to take breaks in the middle of voiceovers, and I ended up going outside and set up a new chicken feeder we have because we have issues with starlings and sparrows coming in and mice eating the chicken food, right? And so we've gotten these feeders that the chickens have to step on to open up. We caught 30 mice the other night, maybe 50 mice, I don't even know. There's just, there are hundreds of them running around the chicken coop at night. They knock the feed all over the ground, and some of that gets wasted. And, if you have any kind of like in this case, livestock, but you have something where the chickens produce eggs. And so we have basically free-range chickens that eat organic food, but mostly they're out eating grass and bugs and things. And then we supplement them with some organic feed. The feed is high in protein, and it makes them lay more eggs. In a similar dozen of eggs at a store, we have free-range chickens that are eating organically, would be probably $9, $10, $11 a dozen now. Maybe you could get it for $8 or something, but not organic. And our eggs are just better if you look at our egg compared to these store-bought eggs. So let's say we valued our eggs at like $12 a dozen, right? Which would be, probably what they're worth. And, they're fresh and they're local and we know where they come from and we have multicolored eggs, all these things. And this is going to weave its way back into what I'm talking about. And you have to look at like a cost-effective amount. How much does it cost for feed? Like how much does it cost for us to get those eggs? Like how much, in terms of the eggs that we eat. We also give eggs away, or there's other things that we do with the eggs, right? Because we sometimes have a surplus. But in terms of the amount of eggs that we eat or we be purchasing from a store, and how much are we spending per dozen eggs, and does it exceed what we would spend if we just bought them from a store? Because that's how you have to look at things, right? You can be a hobby farmer and enjoy having the chickens, but the eggs might cost you $20 a dozen, right? Because the price of feed and the rest of it. And we have all these other animals eating the feed, and it becomes cost prohibitive, right? Like if you want to supplement that by your job, you have a job to supplement your farming, that's great. But if you're going to be a real farmer, you have to make a profit on your livestock. You have to turn some sort of profit. The amount of money it costs for the feed and to keep the chickens going. We have older hens that don't lay that much, and they eat a lot of food because they're, whatever, right? And, so you can't do it that way if you want to be a legitimate farmer. You have to make some money off of the eggs, right? And so one of the ways to cut down costs is stop other animals from invading our chicken coop. And the birds poop all over it. Sometimes we'll have 20 starlings in the coop, a small coop, and they'll poop all over the place, make it messier, and it's just a nightmare. And the mice have their own issues, right? Spilling the food all over the place. So you have to either get rid of those animals, you have to exterminate them, and or stop them from eating the food. And we've stopped them from eating the food by training our chickens now to use this chicken feeder where the chickens have to step on something for the feeder to open. And the mice and the smaller birds can't do that. And so otherwise it's a closed feeder, and we're training our chickens to use it. Now it costs more money for the feeder, but over the long run, it'll be, it'll save us. I bet half of our food goes to other animals than our chickens, right? But as a farmer, you have animals that come to your farm, and we have left a lot of our pasture just growing naturally for, wildflowers, for natural pollinators, and there's rabbits and mice and frogs and turtles and things that use our pond or use other areas. And we have a natural habitat where local wildlife benefits from our lands, right? But sometimes, you're at, in a sense, war with some of these animals over your food. Like you can give them so much percentage of your food, and you want to support the natural environment. You like having these animals on your land. You like seeing them, but you can't let them overrun and take your crops, right? It becomes competitive, and it becomes some sort of a, they don't care that the American government says it's your land. Animals don't care that you have a deed, right? Like nature doesn't care if you have a deed. So you end up developing strategies. And in the case of what we're talking about here, the Israelis wanted land that was the Palestinians. They thought it was promised to them by God. And I'll come back to that again at the very end, because I want to talk about, the nature of divinity and how God is used as a weapon in these various religions. And the reason that they were able to acquire land in the first place is what happened to them, collectively as Jewish people in the Holocaust. They were able to go to these various countries and sell to them this idea that they had been victimized and people hated them to no fault of their own all across the globe. They were being abused in these various countries, whether it be Germany or France or England or America. They were discriminated against. That Jewish people were treated as lesser thans because of, the belief that they killed Jesus or some other belief, whatever it might be. In, the Muslim countries, it was something else, right? In Christian countries, it was that. But that these Jewish people had no way to defend themselves and were constantly being victims. And that's the whole idea when, RFK Jr. or Beatty or Biden or Trump say Israel has the right to defend itself, because you have a group of people who are known for being perpetually victimized by other groups of people, and they finally have their own country in a hostile area where the people around them, the Muslims, particularly don't like them, and they have had conflict since early biblical text, right? The sons of Isaac and Abraham, or whatever it is, the divergent groups. So in the Bible, the biblical story is that there was this dude named Abraham, and he had two sons by two different mothers. His one mother was Hagar, the other mother was Sarah. Sarah was the mother of Israeli people, Jewish people, and Hagar was the mother of Muslims, right? And so Isaac became Jewish and Ishmael became Arab, and they always hated each other. There was a marital dispute, right, where there was two wives, and one of them got the husband to kick the other one out, and then this thing happened. And there was these two groups of people that came from that. That's how it's explained biblically. And so victim consciousness is for other people. You have to sell it to other people. You can use it for yourself. You can really feel like a victim and then convince other people to be a part of that victimization. I had this with my ex. I saw her use victim consciousness her whole life. She was abused by her dad and her mom, at least according to her. And she used that victim consciousness to manipulate other people to do things that were against their own best self-interest or other people's best interest because she was a victim, right? And I saw this not just with her, but, through my own personal interactions, working with kids who were sex offenders through the SALT cycle that I taught to them, was part of the SALT cycle. The entry into the SALT cycle was a victim stance or a victim statement, a poor me statement. Every criminal, every person that does something wrong, it starts with poor me. I get to do this because poor me. And you see this being set up in movies that you watch or TV shows or any number of things that you see on the news where someone is wronged. Some person, some character is wronged, right? I watched a really bad movie, just fast forward it because it was bad. But John Travolta, the manly man John Travolta, his wife was killed by some thugs, much like the movie Death Wish with whatever his name was. They remade the movie. I guess maybe Bruce Willis starred in the sequel. I don't know who made the remake. But it was Charles Bronson was the original guy, and Charles Bronson's family was killed. And he just went and started shooting people, just like with Dirty Harry and these other, TV heroes. And, the wrong has been committed. And they have to sell the wrong to you. They have to make it really egregious that these people are scumbags and bad people. And once you are convinced of the wrong, then anything that you do is justified. If you go nuclear on that person, if they do a little bit to you, but you go nuclear on them, it's totally justified, right? And people are always selling to you that they're the victims of other people. It happens in the truth community. It happens in the news. It happens in, fictional stories. And the idea is that you've been victimized and wrong, and as the victim, you can extract payback. When the big event happened in 2001, America got to extract payback. And that payback, like this false flag payback thing, right? That it's fictitious in its creation, the victim event, but only 500 Americans died. And since that time, a couple 100,000 Afghanis died. The Afghani people, who were already under the thumb of the Taliban, were invaded, and many of them killed. Like I said, 200,000 of them. The Taliban had suppressed the growth of the growing of opium, but when America came in, they started that back up, which created even more problems in America because that opium ended up being some of the opium and OxyContin and these other opiate addictive, this wave of opium addiction that followed the Afghanistan war. Most people don't know about that. And so there was hundreds of thousands of Americans died from the opium problem that was created, partially because of the Afghanistan war. And then after years and years of wrecking that country, America, and making, getting people who became American allies, people who served Americans who are now probably all dead because the American abandoned them and turned it back over to the Taliban, who are now, have all these weapons and $80 million of weapons and American training. So the Taliban are even more empowered. In Iraq, it cost over 1.5 million deaths, many of them civilians and children, birth defects because of the depleted uranium that was used in Fallujah. And then with Libya, another 200,000 or so dead. Gaddafi, a leader who was taking his country from the poorest country in Africa to the richest. He was on par to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. I mean, he did nothing. He wasn't a part of anything. He had given up his weapons of mass destruction. He had made progress. The UN was applauding his progress. And then they say, we got to kill this guy because he's hurting his people, which is not true. He was loved by his people. He had like an 80% approval rating from his people. and that country's destroyed. And all these countries, there's the death count, but it's also they're going to be worse off for maybe 100 years. You take away someone's sovereign right to rule themselves, you destroy their regime. Even if it's a bad government, it becomes worse. And they try to do it in Syria, all because of an event that is sketch as hell, right? Has all this evidence that it was some kind of false flag thing. They got to inflict all that pain on these people, and the Muslim people have been, their reputation has been hurt. They've been abused in America. They've been targeted. They are viewed as, these hostile, horrible people that deserve to be victimized, right? And then you have all these movies where Muslim people were, the Libyans in Back to the Future. Remember, they killed Doc Brown, and they were, after he stole their uranium, But he was, this idea that they were all these Muslim people in the movies for years were these horrible people. They're doing the same thing with domestic terrorists, and they're demonizing all of us in the truth community, right? That somehow we're all victimizing the official story by confronting. That's what Beatty was saying, right? Anybody who goes against the wonderful governments and the wonderful corporations that are doing great things for people, anybody who goes against them is a threat. And if you speak up about it, if you voice your opinion about it, you become a victimizer to these people because they've sold this to people, right? The Jewish people have sold the idea that they have been perpetual victims, and then they get to do whatever they want. And whatever happens next now in Israel or in any of these other countries is justified because the Hamas had victimized them, and all the things you see, these stories, this girl that was on when I turned the TV on for breakfast, I showed you that clip. All these people that are on there crying and complaining and whining and talking about how they're victims, their families are victims because of these bullies, Hamas. And nobody with the critical thinking skills would think this, right? Because we know what's going to happen. It's what Israel wanted to happen the whole time, and they're going to kick the Palestinians, or they're going to claim their land, and the Palestinians are going to be without a country, which is already the case. I hammered RFK Jr. because of his position on this conflict. He really sucks. He can't be a truther. It's a little bit worse for a guy who tries to be a truther, right? Trump sort of cultivated a relationship with the truthers. Joe Biden is an out-and-out New World Order lifelong politician shill. But Trump flirted with the truth community, and he's tried to, at least with the QBs and right-wing truthers, he's tried to cultivate a relationship. And Kennedy has really cultivated a relationship with the truthers, right? And so it's more egregious for them. It's worse for them because they're pretending to be one of us, right, or be a part of this thing. It's always worse when somebody who's a, mainstream person comes in and does damage, pretending to be, your friend and a part of this thing. And so we all feel that, right? And people in the truth community feel that anything that happens to the mainstream people, any of the people that go after us and have, deplatform us and attack us on the media, whatever they get, we're waiting for them to get it, and we hope they get it. We hope bad things happen to them. So Kennedy announced himself as independent last night, after, all the things that he's suffered from his beliefs and things, and yet he's willing to inflict that on the Palestinian people, which just shows how bad he sucks. But he said something that was kind of interesting, which was, something we all know, that in the modern day politics, the Republicans and the Democrats view each other as evil. And when you view your opponent as evil, then anything that you do is justifiably, any evil that you do to the evil people is justified, right? You can justify anything if you can convince people the other side is evil. And that's what Beatty was doing in his speech about Hamas. Anything that they do to the Palestinian people, any land they take, any suffering they inflict on their kids and anybody else is justified because it's these evil people. That's part of this narrative that's a global narrative that Muslim people are terrorists and bad people. And so whatever you do to them, whatever is done to them, is justified, right? And that's victim consciousness. If you can sell yourself as a victim and the people who are victimizing you are evildoers, then you can justify any kind of treatment of them. The QBs, when they wanted so badly to punish all these wrongdoers that they were sold through this, this psychological operation, a military operation, a intelligence community operation to convince them of all these horrible things that are happening, especially to children. And they wanted to throw out our due process and have these evildoers locked up by Trump at Guantanamo Bay. And, they were willing to get rid of all of these rights that we had. And they were supposed to be patriots because they were too stupid to realize that they were getting played or worked, right? And I said this over and over again in the truth community, that when you bash groups of people that are considered protected groups of people, that's people on the LGBTQ spectrum, Black Americans, anybody who's, people of color, and then Jewish people, and to some extent women, when you go after them in like this, a hostile way, and you say things that can be ultimately contribute to a profile that people who are truthers are crazy conspiracy theorists who are racist and homophobic, anti-Semitic, and violent, and all these things that they want to sell you as the villain. And later on, when they are doing whatever they want to do to us, it'll be based in this profile they've created and they've pitched through the media and through politicians and corporations and all the rest of it. They're setting it up to be able to do whatever they want to us by demonizing us. And that's why, whenever I go after another truther, it's for this. Because what the profile they're trying to set up. This happened with Alex Jones. Of course, he's a shill, more recently with this other guy. But there's all these people who have done this, who have fed into this narratives. When you know the opposition's strategy, and they're trying to create a narrative for all of us, and you selfishly feed into that narrative for whatever reason, because you want to bash Jewish people, you want to, criticize this or in some derogatory way that's against the rules of the platform, and it hurts all of us. It hurts the rest of us, your selfishness and your inability to see the big picture and realize it's exactly what the enemy wants you to do. So you're either a shill or you're just a selfish dumbass, right? And you're just feeding into this because they've already shown you what they want to do, and they've done it to all different groups of people, and they want to do it to us, right? They want to demonize us and lump us in with all these other people. Look at what they're doing to the Muslim people globally, because they sold the narrative that these are bad bullies, bad people, and abusers, and anything that's done to them, any evil that's done to them is justified. And they want to do the same thing to the truth community. And so, what do you get out of making these comments, right? It's like, look what happened with Hamas here. What do you get when you make comments like, things that are considered anti-Semitic comments or racist comments? You don't get anything for it. It doesn't help you or help us. It's just being like childish and impulsive and, without any sort of self-restraint and being able to see the bigger picture and what they're trying to do and what they've done in the past and what they're trying to do to us as a community. You see this strategy playing out here in real time, right? Where the obvious aggressor is Israel. They are going to do a land grab, right? This is a land grab, and all the other aspects about it, there's other things to do here, but they want to grab the land. And the only way to do it is that they can become a victim, and conveniently Hamas provided that for them. They sold this, the media sold it globally, and now they're executing their aggressive plan to grab more of Palestine and do whatever they're going to do. It's a power grab, it's a land grab, it is whatever it is. But this is what they're doing. You can see it. And this is how they do it. And they do it through victimization. So when you lash out and you act in a way that provides the context for some group to claim to be victims, they just grab more of your stuff. And so you just have to speak in a more respectful way. You have to be more thoughtful. You have to be more mature because you're being hunted. You're being profiled. They're wanting to turn, and it's not just you. If you want to do it for yourself, then go ahead and destroy your own thing, but don't associate yourself with the rest of us, right? Don't try to be a truther and claim you're part of this group and do something that is ultimately destructive and hurtful to the rest of us, right? And is going to be used as a weapon against the rest of us because you're not our friend. You're a part of the enemy's plan, right? The opposition is looking to do something, devious, something, that creates victim consciousness, and you're feeding into that. And if you're doing that, you're not a friend to the truth community. You're an enemy, right? You're the opposite of a truther. You're adding to the forces that are already aligned against us, right? And you have to just grow up and realize, okay, I have to be more judicious in how I approach this thing. The final piece to this is that religions suck. They all suck for one reason or another. The four major religions and then smaller religious organizations. And to move towards a spiritual future, the difference between religion and spirituality is a religion acts as a middleman between you and divinity, which is probably the most evil thing that can be done. They're depriving you of your natural connection to God. And because of that, human beings have suffered in their ability to become what they are meant to become. And it drives a wedge between you and your soul and you and the divinity that resides within you. Whereas a spiritual person has a relationship with God within them, right? And so Jesus, when he said, the kingdom of heaven lies within, that was his best teaching. And it wasn't, isn't been celebrated or even pushed out there by the various Catholic religions or the various Christian religions because it doesn't suit what they want you to know. They want you to think that you can only get to God through their religious teachings, their book, or Jesus himself that they, have some sort of copyright over. And all those things are not true. God's within you. We're all children of God. And so there's lots of lies and, they warped Jesus' teachings to suit their own ends, right? But his primary teaching that the kingdom of heaven lies within, you can find God within you, is his best teaching, and that's the one that should be pursued. And what Jesus did was he was born Jewish, and he realized that the religion sucked and that, was corrupted, and so he became something else. He became a spiritual person. It's what I did. I was born a Catholic, as was my preceptor. He was born Jewish, and lots of people in India who were born Hindu, and they transcended their religion and became a spiritual person. They were no longer bound to their religion to connect to God, but were connecting to God directly. And that's the future for humanity. And these religions that are very corrupt, and they all use victim consciousness in their own way, and they all suck in their own way. Of course, the cross is a way of using victim consciousness and guilt and shame and the nature of human, and you're born a sinner and all these things as a way to demean you and keep you from being what you ultimately could become, was a pure expression of your soul. And all these religions and the countries that have propagated these religions across the globe, European countries with Christianity, of course in America, and then all these other countries that have propagated their own religion. Of course, there's a billion Muslims, there's I don't know how many Christians and how many Jewish people there are, and there's billions of Hindus and these other, whatever it is. But all these religions are going to have to be eradicated. And people aren't going to give them up because they have such a stronghold on people's beliefs, passed down for generations. So more than anything else, there's all the destructive, immoral, and degraded aspects of our cultures globally. And they have to be eradicated through a divine process, not through anything we have to do. But the reason why the culture has to be taken down, of course, there's the demonic monetary system. There's all these negative things about it. But the religions have to be wiped out. There'll be a period in the future where all those religions will have disappeared. It's not that far off. Of course, there have been many religions that were prominent in the past that have dissipated, right? But all the religions have to be wiped off the face of the earth, and people have to rise up to a higher level, which is direct contact with God within them. And that's something I talk very, specifically about because of the Sajmark system that acts as an advocate. It helps people to make this connection through the transmission and cleaning process, which I've talked about in depth in my other channels, my, Gratefullness meditation one and my journey series. I'm not going to talk about it here. But it's there for people, this idea of, human beings in the future all being love-based and saints and spiritual beings. And that's what has to happen. Otherwise, people have no future, right? Our future has to be some sort of evolution because the manipulation, the lies, the decadence, the selfishness, the entitlement, the everything, the arrogance, all the negative qualities that go along with human beings today that's associated with our culture, with our religions, with all of it. And the hatred and the malice and the violence and all the things that people possess that they're so attached to and justify because somehow they can see themselves as a victim. And They can perpetrate this, these conditions and inflict them on other people, and sometimes individually, sometimes in groups. But all of it has to go. Like, we've seen enough, right? We all know it. We're just not doing well. And if there isn't significant changes, then that's what's happening. So all these religions are displaying themselves, all these groups, the economy, all these various power structures are displaying themselves because it's there for us to see what the problem is and that we can't keep on doing this. And those of us who get it, those of us who want to be part of some sort of a change, starting with a change within ourselves, and becoming more service-oriented and more, doing God's bidding instead of being ego-centered and selfish and narcissistic and competitive and hostile and all these things that goes with it. And those of us who want to be a part of it will be a part of it, and those of us who don't will be taken out of the equation because we can't continue to go on in this direction. Anywho, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.